Hello and welcome today to this debate over gun control. I'm Ryland, your moderator for today. In class, over the last 12 weeks, we have begun to have a greater understanding of debate. From our very first chapter, it is defined as to turn over in one's mind. We sorted through why we debate. Is it simply to impress an audience or to take home the trophy? I believe my classmates and I can certainly agree that we may have thought it was about winning in December, but our minds have been changed. We must consider the purpose of debate is to seek truth. This helps hold each of us accountable to the higher truth of digging through Scripture as our ultimate authority. When considering this definition, we can probably agree some of the best debates happen within ourselves as we each seek to live out truth in our lives. In addition to debating and seeking truth, throughout our class, Miss Amy has challenged each one of us to flex our brains and commit to memory quotes that will benefit us, but always saying Scripture should be hidden within our hearts and pour out of our mouths. One of the quotes we have memorized is by William Blake, which states, "A truth that is told with bad intent beats all the lies that you can invent." When you let the weight of that sink in, I think you could ponder on what is being said for quite some time. But back to the purpose of today, the debate. Our resolution states, gun control is ethical and will make the U.S. a safer place, which may not align with what each side may feel personally, but they are being forced to defend it. The affirmative team will open each debate with a 4-minute opening statement, which will defend the resolution. And then the negative team that is against the resolution will get 4 minutes to dazzle you with why they are against the resolution. Then we will rotate through 2 rounds of rebuttals, where affirmative will speak 2 minutes, then negative, back to affirmative, and negative before we hear the final closing statements, which will be no more than 4 minutes for each side. Macias once said, "Courage is the knowledge of what is and is not to be feared." So to my fellow classmates, may you have courage and humility as you seek truth. With that being said, please silence or turn off your phones, then we will progress into the debate.
On April 16, 2007, Sun Point Cho stormed into the Virginia Tech campus with 2 sidearms and killed 32 students and faculty. On the same day, the shooter committed a separate attack and injured 17 more students and teachers by gunfire. That day, 32 people lost their lives prematurely due to a gun. The student shooting at the time was the largest lone attack in the U.S. and changed the lives of the family members and friends forever. This attack demonstrated the catastrophic consequences of loose gun control. While this attack was very large for its time, it most certainly wasn't the first. On April of 1999, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold killed 32 students and 1 teacher. They carried 4 guns in total. After the attack, the shooters committed suicide. The attack was committed after criminal background checks were required by the U.S. government after the bill was enforced in 1998. Obviously, it didn't keep these people from committing their horrible attack, and it won't stop people now. Moving forward, we need more action. The people of the U.S. have been blinded by the misleadings of the NRA and gun rights advocates. The Americas has 28.2 homicides per 1 million people. This means 8,855 people died from a gun-related homicide. Guns are a tool that can be used for good or evil. The problem lies in the fact that we live in an evil world. I believe my opponents would agree that this is true. In an evil world, bad things happen if we give guns to evil people. The definition given by Google for gun control is this: the regulation and sale and use of firearms. Gun control isn't taking guns away from everyone, but keeping them from evil people. By doing this, it would limit the firearms which people plan to do evil with, and maximizing the guns given to the proper people that have been deemed safe. To do this, we must enforce stricter policies on gun sales, and we must also be proactive by reviewing the people that already have guns. The U.S. has the highest gun ownership in the world, 88.2 guns for every 100 people. The U.S. has the highest gun homicide rates compared to any other developed nation. This demonstrates the need for gun control. If other countries have figured it out, other ways of controlling their guns, why can't we? We have been a leader in the world for many years when it comes to our government, but now we must take a back seat and follow the example of other countries. To do this, we will look at Canada. While Canada may not be a perfect example, its government structure and its people's attitude towards guns are very similar to the U.S. Since 1996, Canada has seen 25 massacres. In the same time, the U.S. has seen 91. What caused this, you might ask? A gun bill was enforced in Canada in 1996, which limited the type of gun you could buy, and tighter regulations were given to gun salesmen. This clearly shows that gun control can work. 1/3 of the people in Canada own a firearm. This shows that people can still own guns, but we have to just be careful who we give the guns to. Now, the government can refuse more people that pose a risk to our safety and our children's safety because they now have a larger say. To control the sale and use of firearms in Canada, Canada has the Firearms Investigation Enforcement Service Directorate that assists the police in keeping illegal guns off the streets.
Is gun control ethical? Will it make America a safer place? Let me start off by defining ethical. Ethical means pertaining to moral principles. I am against the resolution for 4 reasons: gun ownership as it relates to crime, the failure of the gun laws in Britain, the illegal sale of weapons, and the true meaning of our rights. Firstly, I oppose the resolution because of the way the gun ownership affects crime. I believe that we can all agree that to stop a crime is a moral duty, for we are our brother's keeper, in spite of what many do, think, and say. A study performed by the NRA showed that a person with concealed carry is 5 times less likely to commit a crime than an off-duty police officer. On top of that, another study performed in 2017 showed that each year, nearly 2 million crimes are stopped by a legally armed citizen. 2 million crimes. And of those 2 million, 200,000 are women who defended themselves against would-be rapists. And we wonder why there are less men in America than women. To give you an idea, in 1 minute, 3.8 citizens use a gun to defend themselves. That's once every 16 seconds, twice as often as a violent crime occurs in Britain. Speaking of Britain, let's talk about the huge failure their gun laws have turned out to be. While before gun laws were passed, Britain's crime was only about 10% of the U.S. crime rate. After they implemented their gun laws, the violent crime spiked up to 436% of the U.S. crime rate. These figures came from records released by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and M15, which is the equivalent of the Bureau of Investigation. But then you may ask, what about the school shootings? It is true that these have begun to occur more and more often. But that is because no law-abiding citizens can enter school property carrying a gun. But you may say, but wouldn't gun control have stopped the criminal from obtaining a gun? The sad truth is that it would not. In my research, I found that most school shooters obtained the gun which they used by illegal methods. For that matter, in states which have gun laws, 60% of all the inmates obtained a gun illegally to perform a crime, as compared to only 40% in states with little to no gun laws. Finally, what did the Founding Fathers mean when they put the Second Amendment into the Constitution. Consider this. What was the standard military rifle in 1776? It was a barrel-loaded musket. What was the standard hunting rifle? It was the same thing. Now, I'm not trying to insinuate that we need to use anti-tank guns today to hunt deer or use grenade launchers to hunt mountain lions. My point is this. The Founding Fathers knew that when a government became stronger than the people, it became a monarchy. They knew the shame of oppression. They knew the darkness of tyranny. They knew the loss of fundamental God-given rights. Therefore, I say that gun control is not ethical and most certainly will not make America a safer place. Thank you.
Canada has a higher enforcement to get a gun. You must pass multiple safety courses and background checks. In Canada, they do background checks every single day on every single person who has a license to get a gun. You must pass psychological tests, you must pass background tests, safety tests, and you have to pass a safety test and a written test just to get a license to buy a gun. And then you have to send your application and payment to the government, and you still may not get accepted to get a gun. If we have seen fewer massacres in Canada, why would we not use their findings to aid our struggles? If we have seen that fewer people will die, why would we not preemptively save them? If we have seen that the laws will not prevent these shootings, why would we not act? My opponent has made a point that Europe, their gun laws have not worked. Canada is what we would follow the role of. As we would follow Canada's role, not Europe. In 2012, 8,855 criminal gun homicides were in the FBI's records. 258 were private citizens which were deemed justifiable by the FBI. This means that not all guns that's all.
First of all, I'd like to begin by addressing a claim that our opponent has made. He claimed that America has the highest homicide rate in the world. That is actually not true. First place is actually claimed by Honduras. Second is Russia. Third, Venezuela. Fourth is the UK. And fifth is Mexico. The United States actually stands at the 103rd highest homicide rate in the world. And recently, he made the claim that we should model Canada. not the UK. I would like to remind you, Canada is a frozen wasteland. There are very few people there. Their population and spread does not match the American does not match the American civilization. Therefore, the UK, however, has many big cities and vast, densely populated areas. Massacres don't happen in countries, or just the country where you can kill 15 people or less, because the shooter wants to have the maximum collateral. Therefore, they'll move on to the biggest city. So therefore, we should not actually model after Canada. Second of all, since 2016, there have been 33 mass shootings. That's 11 a year. Yes, this is terrible, but we have 2 million crimes that are stopped each year using guns. Which would you rather have? 11 mass shootings a year on top of 2 million crimes that could have been stopped by guns? Or would you rather have 2 million crimes stopped and the mass shootings still exist?
While the U.S. may not be the highest in homicides in the world, almost 4,000 gun-related deaths happened in 2017. Half of these are suicides, and many of them are homicides. In 2016, criminal homicides were 14,415. In 2017, 15,549. Toronto and Montreal are very large cities in Canada, and they compare to many cities in the U.S. This is why we seemed it justifiable to compare these two cities, or these two countries. In 2017, only 660 gun-related homicides happened in Canada. 12,708,000 guns were owned by civilians in Canada. This demonstrates that people can still own guns, and they can fight back. But we must make it harder to get a gun for the people that would be committing these crimes. We aren't trying to keep guns away from the people that would stop crimes. We're trying to keep the guns away from the people that are committing the crimes.
It is true. It is our duty to stop crime and to do everything in our power to stop crime. But the truth is, which is better, a citizen with a gun or the government with guns? In all honesty, what are the comparisons between the police and the armed citizens? To begin with, there are 80 million people in America that own guns. There are only 794,000 police officers. Mass shootings occur more often than we would like to admit. And when a shooting begins to happen, how many people on average die when an officer is called to the scene? By the time the officers gotten there, usually 14 people have already died. Compare this to only 2 people if there were armed citizens there. Officers, also because of the way that the wheels turn in the government, have an 11% error rate. That's over a 10. Armed citizens, 2%. Furthermore, a man who has taken it upon himself as an officer to make the officers' opinions known said, "All the officers I know approve of citizens carrying guns. In fact, when graphs of gun ownership and crime rates are overlaid, crime rates rise inversely to gun ownership." And also, in conclusion, if we banned guns, it would only be law-abiding citizens that would give up their guns.
The rules we have today are the result of people in the past who demonstrated in Colonel Kimball. We're not trying to ban guns. We're trying to get people to keep guns, just get the right people to keep guns. If we make it harder for people to get guns, the wrong people to get guns, that would solve many problems. And one armed citizen, or even multiple armed citizens, could not have stopped the Las Vegas shooting or many other large massacre shootings. In closing, I would also like to address, as mentioned earlier, the United States has the highest civilian gun ownership rate in the world. 88.2 guns are owned per 100 civilians. This means that about 8 in 10 people you come across walking down the street, in the grocery store, or even visiting your house owns a gun. There are many problems with this, including the fact that no one knows the person's intentions with the gun or guns they possess. Some people use them for hunting, others for recreation, but there are many people who have bad intentions with guns, such as Sung Hai Cho, the man who committed one of the most deadly shootings in history. I'd like everyone to take a moment to imagine the pain and suffering that the family members of these victims face. Imagine a loved one or even a child of yours being murdered by a weapon such as a gun. And to think all of this could have been prevented if we had done what needed to be done in the first place, which was and still is to enforce stricter gun laws. These families were left with the thought of their loved ones' dying moments in horror, plagued by the impending war that was inevitable. Millions of lives have been lost to guns, whether they were intended or not, and millions of lives could have been saved if we would pass these bills to make guns harder to come across. This would possibly keep guns out of the wrong people's hands, which in itself would save hundreds of lives every year. Throughout the Bible, specifically in 1 John, it's demonstrated that evil people exist in the world and will do what it takes to enact their horrific plans. If we pass the bills that make getting a gun harder, more people that would possibly commit these tragedies would be deterred and be left with only simple tools such as swords and knives, which are easy to combat guns. In Canada, residents are required to obtain a license, pass a safety course, pass a psychological test, as well as many background checks to be able to even purchase a gun. This means that if a person does not meet the requirements necessary, they cannot purchase a gun. In 2017, over 12 million guns were owned by civilians in Canada. About 12,708,000. There were only 660 gun homicides. The problem is not necessarily how many guns. The problem is that guns are getting into the wrong people's hands, and if we would ensue gun laws to ensure that the people who are purchasing guns meet the criteria given, that would save countless lives.
We've stated our reasons for why gun control is unethical and should be and would be ineffective. As aforementioned, there are 200,000 cases in which women have defended themselves and their honor. These are our mothers, our sisters. Don't they deserve a chance to defend themselves? I recently interviewed an NRA spokeswoman in Yukon. She told me that as a single woman in her 60s, no one would take her guns away. She said that she owns rural rent properties and that she always carries her gun with her as an assurance of safety. You hear more and more stories and see on the news how women are just disappearing and being kidnapped. Without my gun, perhaps I could have been in one of those cases. No one is ever going to take away my personal safety, she said. We mentioned the failure of gun laws in the UK. With recent stabbing spikes, violent crime is easier than ever to accomplish. The weapons are more available and the victims cannot stop you. With the British legislature calling for a ban on knives, will not those with the desire to kill move on to other weapons such as bombs, cars, or chemical acids? When everything is banned, should the bans work, of course, will not humanity's evil nature find other methods? Before weapons were ever invented, Cain killed Abel, did he not? And in William Golding's novel, Lord of the Flies, the boys implement other devices and kill each other with their bare hands. As in Tolkien's novel, Lord of the Rings, Gollum is able to kill countless people with his bare hands. No ban will keep humanity sane. Killers will kill just as much efficiency and vigor with or without guns. Finally, with the power our government has and is intent on taking, for instance, the freedom of speech and religion on school and public grounds, if we had not the right to bear arms, then what would stop our nation from becoming like Venezuela or Russia under Lenin or Stalin? Firearms are the assurance to an American of this: a corrupt government will not endure. Shelley Johnson. My opponent cannot prove that criminals will obey laws, however strict. Michael Vance, this past year, committed several murders and other shootings. He owned an AK-47 style weapon. That's illegal. He bought it off the black market from a guy who stole it. How can you keep other people from selling guns on the black market and stealing them? My opponent also said that melee weapons are easy to combat. Swords and knives, easy to combat. No, I do not think so. Because melee has always been revered amongst the militaries as one of the most dreaded types of combat. Always the bloodiest and most honored, I guess. Finally, beginning in 1933, the Holocaust, an approximate 6 million Jewish deaths. Of course, the genocide did not start until 1941. In 5 years, 6 million plus were slaughtered. How did the Jews allow themselves to be herded and rounded up like cattle? Why didn't they fight back? The answer would be in one of the very first restrictions that Hitler placed on the Jews. In 1938, Hitler placed gun control on the Jews, forbidding them to own weapons of any kind. So guns are not the only thing in this debate that cause death. Gun control has too. This is not the only case either, as the Ottoman Empire enacted gun control on the Armenians before committing the Armenian genocide. In conclusion, I ask, how much freedom are you willing to give up? In these historical cases, people had no choice. And yet now people are crying out for their freedoms to be taken from them. I value my freedoms and the cost others pay to give me them. It is disgrace to believe that others don't. I encourage you to protect your freedoms and the freedoms of those around you. Do your duty and defend your rights and the rights of others. Should the time come, I exhort you to challenge those in favor of this resolution and make your stand for the ethical right that is yours. Thank you.